What's up, my friends? Welcome to another episode of the Whole Health of Rob Carney podcast. And on this episode, we have my friend Chloe Schweinshaut. And Chloe is a registered dietitian, nutritionist who owns a private practice, Riverside Nutrition. She's also a Massachusetts native like myself. She works with a variety of clients using a holistic approach to nutrition and wellness with a particular focus on first responders. So she's worked with members of the Boston Fire Department, New York Fire Department, Cambridge Fire Department, Boston Police Department, as well as private ambulance services to help them lead a healthier lifestyle with issues such as weight loss, cancer, diabetes, and heart disease. She's also a sought-after speaker and has spoken at Boston Fire's Mullane Health and Safety Symposium, as well as the Fire Department of New York's Uniformed Officers Association and New York City Health and Safety Seminar. In addition, Chloe is a nutrition consultant for O2X, which is a human performance company that works with first responder communities, the military, and federal agencies. And right now, Chloe lives in Cambridge, Massachusetts with her 4 kids, 2 dogs, and her firefighter husband. So Chloe, welcome to the show.
Rob, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
Yeah, and this is a topic when we first connected that really stood out to me, for people that know me at a deeper level. And I did my senior internship in high school with the fire department where I went in the town I went to high school with. And then I ended up being, on call with them. And, realistically, as an on-call guy who was still in college, I didn't do a whole heck of a lot, but got to see a lot of the inside of what it looks like in there. And so I definitely was able to see pretty clearly that health is a very big challenge for a lot of these first responders. And I had a number of friends who had, fathers who were police officers. So kind of seeing a lot of these trends. And when you said that this is an area specialized in, I was very excited to, talk with you about it. So I'd love to just kind of start with what got you interested in working with, health in general, then also with first responders specifically.
Absolutely. So nutrition, being a dietitian is a bit of a career change for me. I actually started work out of college working with the Boston Red Sox. And that was a great opportunity to really, get to know myself and my strengths and my weaknesses and what I wanted to do in the working world. And, what I found, I ended my career there working in human resources and working with employee relations. And one of the things that I helped oversee was the workplace wellness initiatives. And at the time, in the early 2000s, workplace wellness was really in its infancy. So really got to see from the ground up, went into that. And nutrition was always a hobby and a passion of mine, but it wasn't until I started bringing in the speakers and, working with people like the nutritionists and the dietitians who are working with the employees on how eating would affect, not just their health, but their performance throughout the day, that I really made the decision that, all right, I need to go back to school and work on this. And, because I was a little later to the game and I wasn't a dietitian right out of the get-go, I do think the benefit that afforded me was that I really got to understand what I want and what I didn't want out of the field. And I knew that I wanted to work with people in the one-on-one setting and not so much of the clinical setting. I knew that I wanted to have my own practice. As you've said, I have 4 kids, a big family. It kind of had to work for me too. And so I've started, and I've always seen a variety of people, from babies to, the elderly, and everything from weight loss to weight gain to picky eating to, medical nutrition therapy, diabetes, heart disease, cancer. But my husband is a firefighter. He works in the city of Cambridge. And, through word of mouth, I kind of started seeing some of his buddies on the job. And then, they started referring me to some of their buddies on the job. And then I kind of had this little niche of working with firefighters. And it was really interesting to me, not just because I had such a personally vested interest in keeping firefighters healthy, but also because I really came to appreciate and be acutely aware of the challenges that are presented to firefighters and shift workers and first responders in general, just due to things like the disruption of their sleep cycle and their eating patterns and their stress response. Never mind, the things that firefighters are exposed to, the nasty toxins, the carcinogenic things that we know that are really disruptive to the body's functions. So I really became interested in that, and just realized that there wasn't a whole lot out there in terms of resources for firefighters. So in addition to my private practice, I started this website called myhealthyresponse.com. And that was really designed to, arm firefighters and police officers and first responders in general with kind of healthy eating plans, foods to eat while on details and shift works and things like that. So I've been fortunate enough to be invited to various departments throughout the country to, speak to them and work with their firefighters, their police, military, EMTs, everyone on their personal nutrition and why specifically first responder nutrition and shift work nutrition is different and what the unique set of needs are. Because I think that can be a big frustration is, so often nutrition advice is doled out to the masses, where this is a very particular group that has a very unique set of needs that aren't always being addressed.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for outlining that. And I definitely noticed, spending time at the department is, like you mentioned, sometimes you're making lunch and then you get a call and you got to go. So
Yeah.
you may not have eaten what you wanted to. And then you get back, it's like, well, I don't want to make the time to make food. I'm just going to have something quick and easy. So sometimes convenience has to be a factor. And I also remember there were a couple of guys who were really good at cooking, but when those guys weren't on the shifts, the guys didn't eat as well because the two guys that were the master chefs essentially weren't on the job. So I think it's a big challenge also depending on facility to facility. And what is the level of expertise with people's knowledge of cooking and nutrition? And that can have a whole host of, challenges associated with that. And so, really educating people is the first step, because I think, the way I look at it is if people knew better, they would do better. But a lot of people aren't aware of how some of these things affect us. And like you said, the knowledge of nutrition is not a very widespread phenomenon, which is crazy to think about. The food we put into our body is not a very popular topic that is, it's obviously gaining traction in recent years, but, as a whole, when we look at the general population, it's not very well addressed. And especially, with a lot of these guys who are putting their body under an insane amount of stress. And like you mentioned, the disruption of sleep schedules, the irregular meal patterns, and that can be a really big challenge. So, I'd love to just kind of hear, where do you start? Because there's so many areas that we could dive into, whether it's the sleep, whether it's the food, whether it's the regular, like, where do you even start to address these many challenges that these first responders are, really dealing with?
Yeah, it's a great question. And to your point, I think a lot of it has to do with education. I think so often, look, everybody wants to be healthy, right? It's just more of a matter of things like, all right, well, what's convenient? It's also knowledge, like oftentimes I'll talk to people and they'll say, oh my gosh, I had no idea that that wasn't something I should be eating. I feel with this group in particular, meal timing is one of the first places I start, because what I say to this group all the time is, in this job, there is so much of it. The majority of your job is out of your control, but proper nutrition is something that you can control. So really kind of honing in on that. I think it's important too, is kind of everyone knows who's a firefighter, they're like, yeah, my sleep's not good, or, I know I could be healthier. And so it's all right, taking that knowledge and making an action plan from that. And what I tell people is, all right, well, it's not just that your sleep isn't good, because so often people are like, oh, I sleep on my days off, or a lot of these guys have other jobs. Most of them have other jobs outside of firefighting. So they're not, they're rolling in from one bad night of sleep to working all day, their body's just not recovering at all. And so, the first step and where you kind of start is explaining, yes, what this is physically doing to your body. We know that shift work has been linked to a whole host of conditions, including like heart disease, type 2 diabetes, obesity, cancer, depression. And so I think, once folks kind of say, all right, I know that the cards are kind of stacked against me and my health, so to speak, in this job, that doesn't mean that's my destiny. That doesn't mean it's my fate. It just means that I have to pay particular attention to what I'm putting in my body and how I can control the recovery when it is possible. We know that for firefighters and police, about 75% of them total are classified as overweight or obese. And we know that, there are several factors on their job that do contribute to this excessive weight gain. We know that it's the shift work and the irregular work hours. We know that, due to that, you can develop some pretty nasty eating patterns, right? You come back from a call in the middle of the night, you're hungry, you tend to snack. Also, the firehouse especially seems to be a dumping ground, where folks love to drop off baked goods. They love to drop off leftover, pastries. They love to bring energy drinks, which is, people's heart is in the right place. But all of that stuff is really accessible and it's really tempting, especially when you're sleep deprived and your body's craving that energy. As you said, you can, make a meal, sit down to eat this delicious meal and get a call right in the middle of it. So you kind of have to get up and go. So, long-winded answer, the first place I really start, is educating, like, why do you care? Like, why should you care as someone in this profession about your health and controlling those controllables? And then from there, what I really focus on is, because you can't control your sleep, you can't control the type of calls you'll see, you can't control your stress response, but what you can control is meal timing. And that's a huge part of that. One of the things, and I try to, when I'm presenting or when I'm working with groups, I try not to start with this because usually I'll get booed out of the room almost immediately. But one of the things I do say to people is, the most important thing that you can do is not eat in the middle of the night. So really cut off your eating at a certain time, whether it's 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock at night. Your body has these kind of magic hours in the middle of the night where, I call it's like the transformation period. It's where your body goes to work and does all of its repairs and restorations and waste cleanups and, the free radical removals. So all the nasty things that they're exposed to, not just in fires, but in their jobs, with their stress response, everything, your body actively works to fix that in the middle of the night. Hormone secretion, human growth hormones, satiety hormones, hunger hormones. So if you're eating in the middle of the night, you're really messing with that circadian rhythm. You're really messing with your body's ability to do its waste cleanup. So you're stacking the cards further against you. So I say to them, like, obviously you're going to be up in those hours some nights. Some nights maybe you're lucky and you're not, but some nights you definitely are. So please, whatever you do, do not eat during that time. So that's really where we start, is kind of them just having, setting a schedule that works for them for the most part. So, eat in the morning, eat at lunch, eat at dinner, and then call it quits for the night.
Yeah. And I think, like you said, there's a lot of things out of their control. And then, but there are also a lot of times that, like you mentioned, convenience is a big thing. I remember sometimes we come back from a call and, the lady at the front desk, like, oh, someone dropped off these donuts. And then, guys go in, take one, next guy comes in, take one. And I remember, so I worked directly with my fire chief during my internship, and he knew I was, really starting to get into the healthy side of things. So he kind of gave me the look of like, I'm going to take this, but kind of aware of the fact that I was like, man, you don't need to take that right now. It's not always the best decision. And I remember there's always this joke going around that, yeah, you always can tell who the new guys are because they're the guys in good shape. They just got out of the academy. But then once you see the veterans, we all gain the weight. It's just part of the job. And it's kind of like this acceptance of, hey, I'm just going to get unhealthy over time. And, that's just kind of the way it goes. But that doesn't have to be the way it is. And obviously that is completely dependent, a big generalization, depending on the department, how active it is, what type of calls you're dealing with. It's going to be very different department to department. But I think that it's important to recognize, like, it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be, hey, you get out of the academy and you're in the best shape of your life, and then you just kind of slowly go down this path of gaining weight, of, having health problems, sleep problems. And like you mentioned, obesity is a big challenge for a lot of these people. And, I think many of us are well aware of the fact that obesity leads to a lot of other issues, not just the weight itself, but that can lead to a lot of things. And you compound that with a lot of these chemicals that they're exposed to. You compound that with the, secretion of cortisol at night, which is supposed to be melatonin and all these other, human growth hormone, all these type of things that are now getting out of balance. And you have a recipe for a really big challenge. So I think a lot of things you mentioned, meal timing is really important. Things that we can control. And that's where I think, with anybody, we need to start where we can control. Because ultimately there's always going to be things outside of our control. But if we can start with what we have, use what we can, that's where the change is going to begin. So, I kind of want to dive into a little bit on, the importance of weight loss. I just kind of outlined some of these things, but obviously it's a big challenge for a lot of these first responders. So how can we focus on helping these people to stimulate weight loss and, preventing you from getting there in the first place?
Yeah. So, I think one of the big shifts that I've seen, and I don't know about you, Rob, but one of the things that I've seen in the past, several years is really an awareness that's come into fire services about, it used to be, oh, heart disease, guys who are overweight, they might drop dead of a heart attack in a fire, this and that. But now the spotlight has really been shifted to cancer. And it used to be such a badge of honor to come back from fires and be smoky and have the soot all over you, and now it's like, guys, no, like this is literally killing you. And so having conversations like this, having speakers come in and talk to firefighters, there's firefighters are now, departments are getting special dryers that, will extractors to get their bunker gear clean immediately after fires. So they're not breathing in this carcinogenic stuff constantly. So I really feel that, with that awareness, firefighters, their health is becoming really important, because it's true. And I hear that all the time. It's like, who the guys are coming out of the academy because they're fit, they're in shape, they're motivated. And then slowly over time, everything kind of starts to falter and fall apart. And, one of the tragedies, one of the many tragedies in fire services can be that it is the best job in the world in so many ways, but if you can't enjoy the retirement and enjoy all of the things that you've worked so hard for, what's the point? And it's so sad. I mean, you open the newspaper all the time and you just read the obituaries, and it's, firefighters, chiefs, captains, lieutenants, anyone who's retired, and then they've dropped dead of cancer, a few months, a few years later. And, really trying to say, all right, but there's something you can do now at this time, even if retirement's, still 10, 20, 30 years off for you, and maybe you're just 5 pounds overweight, 10 pounds overweight, like this compounds and the two are connected. So, why weight loss? Like, why, talking about things we can control? Like, if your weight is something that's creeping up on you, you're not as in shape as you were right out of the academy, or even just as you want to be, like, why do you care about weight loss at this time? Why is it bad to just accept that it's a fate of firefighters? And it's like, all right, well, we know that being overweight and obese puts you at a significantly higher risk for certain cancers, okay? We know that being overweight, over obese puts you at a significantly higher risk for type 2 diabetes, for things like sleep apnea. We know that sleep apnea has a whole host of negative effects. So if we can kind of really trim it down to like, all right, what can you control in the here and now? Like sleep apnea, yes, you can get a CPAP machine, you can do this, but like, let's lose weight. Like, let's get to that first and, and tackle that. And so really, in terms of, if someone says to me, like, I need to lose weight, I don't know where to start. That's why I say, like, we're starting with meal timing. We're making sure that you're not eating throughout the night. We're making sure that you're not snacking. I want to make sure that you're drinking enough water. Half your body weight in ounces a day is what I recommend. Not just to help flush out the toxins that you're exposed to, but for overall health in general, also for satiety, for things like that. We also know that water, an increase in water consumption, can help reduce your risk for certain cancers as well, particularly bladder cancer, which is big in fire services. So water is also really important. And once we kind of have those two components in, because oftentimes I think, people look at dietitians or nutritionists and they kind of see like the food police, right? And so I'll walk into the fire station, they're like, hide the donuts, hide the, it's like, no, 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 I don't care that you guys eat that. We just need to make sure that other healthy habits are in place first. So that's why we work on the lifestyle things. We work on the meal timing, we work on the water consumption, and then we start to work on the balancing of your plate. We know that an increase in fruits and vegetables and produce and fiber also reduces not just your cholesterol, not just your blood sugar, but also your cancer risk too, and helps you lose weight. So working on, all right, where can we increase the amount of fruits and vegetables on your plate too? And kind of once we have those three components in, then people really kind of feel like, all right, you're not putting me on this really strict diet or this really strict plan, or you're not being the food police. This feels very manageable, and hopefully easy given their particular lifestyle.
And I think a really important piece of that I'm always working with my clients is, hey, the goal here isn't to just upheave everything you know and love and completely change everything. Say, like you said, food police, health police, whatever you want to call it, shifting everything. You got to get rid of that. You got to get rid of that. You got to get rid of that. Start doing this, because nobody's going to do that. That's going to be stressful. And for most people in the first responding industry, that's not even going to be practical. They can't change everything right now because they got too much on their plates. So how can we start by implementing these small changes? And for me, a big thing that I recommend, and this is not for first responders because they're moving a lot more than the average desk worker, but saying, go for a walk for 5 minutes a day. If you can't commit to 5 minutes a day, then I can't help you, because anybody can make 5 minutes a day to walk. So starting with the small pieces, stop using your phone 30 minutes before bed. A lot of little things. And I think that's what I love about what you're saying is starting with the things that we can control, starting with the simple things that are not changing everything that we know and love. It's not saying, hey, don't eat the donuts. Say, hey, let's start by not eating the donuts after 10 p.m. or after 9 p.m. or whatever the timing is. Let's start there. And then once, okay, we mastered that. Now maybe make it say, hey, don't eat the donuts before 8 p.m. Then maybe, hey, only eat one donut a day if you're eating 2 donuts a day, and just start carving it back. So it's not this big stressful event that people feel like their identity to some degree is under attack, that their lifestyle, what they know, what they love, what they think they get joy out of is having to be changed. So I think it's these small things that can make the biggest difference. And that's what I really love about what you're sharing here.
Absolutely. And Rob, to your point too, and I love that piece of advice. I mean, the walking for 5 minutes a day. And I do say that to a lot of firefighters too, is, it's not that you have to go out in the neighborhood and walk. It can just be a walk right around the kitchen or the fire station, or jump on the treadmill in the gym if you can, especially, if they come to me and they're like, hey, I've just been diagnosed like as pre-diabetic, or my blood sugar is a little high. If you walk after a meal, your blood sugar goes down. That's one of the
Right.
best things you can do to thwart getting type 2 diabetes. Or even if you have type 2 diabetes, we can reverse it by doing simple things like this. And I just think so often people don't know, but it has to be small and manageable. And so people don't feel like, okay, I'm going to go gung ho on this for 4 to 6 weeks, and then after that, go back to normal. It's like, no, this kind of has to feel like the new normal.
Right. And I think that's a big thing I was talking about too, is, with any goal that we're working towards, it comes down to patience, persistence, consistency. And those are kind of the three pillars that I lead people with, because ultimately the goals aren't going to happen overnight. You didn't get overweight overnight. That is a result of a lifestyle over time that has compounded. So you're going to have to embody some patience to say, hey, I may not lose all the weight tonight. And just because I don't lose it tonight doesn't mean it doesn't work. Got to have a little bit of faith, have a little patience, say, hey, this may take some time. Got to be persistent, because ultimately there's going to be those temptations. They're going to have obstacles that we need to overcome. We need to persist through those, and we have to be consistent, because ultimately, like you said, we got to create that that new level of what's normal for my lifestyle. We have to whatever we do consistently is going to compound, because these bad habits that, let's say, overweight person X has been doing, they've been probably pretty consistent with those bad habits to get them to this point. So now how can we switch that bad habit with a good habit? And now we take one out, we put one in, and now we have a consistent new habit forming that's going to result in a much healthier, sustainable lifestyle. But that's going to take consistency compounded over time. We can't go for a run once and say, hey, I'm good, I'm a runner now, I can go run a marathon. No, it takes some training, it takes some consistent action to see those results. And so, I think that there's a lot of things that we can dive into on that note, but kind of wanted to shift gears a little bit towards food specifically, because you talk about cancer a lot, you talk about weight loss a lot, but what are some cancer fighting foods? Because I think that's a topic that, whether you're a first responder or not, doesn't matter where you are on the spectrum of life. Cancers, I think it's like the number 2 leading cause of death. I think it's like heart disease, cancer, and I think I think it's actually medical malpractice might be up there at number 3. But so let's say for number 2, if that's the number, cancer is a big challenge for a lot of people. What are some foods that we can utilize to help fight off cancer and, free radicals and all these type of things.
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, cancer is so prevalent, unfortunately in our society, but especially in fire services. I think it was responsible for over 70% of line of duty deaths since 2016, which is just a staggering number. And that is the other component is right. Once we work on meal timing, once we work on increasing our water, and if we can increase our movement, that's great. Let's look at foods specifically and what foods have been studied and proven to have cancer fighting benefits. Really the powerhouses are those cruciferous vegetables. So I say like broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, any of those are always going to be great to include. Things like garlic and onions, fish, anything omega-3 containing is really good. Spices, herbs, turmeric is a really big one. Green tea. For fruits, berries are really big, citrus fruits and tomatoes. So really colorful. And that's what I tell folks is if you can fill half of your lunch and dinner plates with a fruit or a vegetable and just make it as colorful as possible, you're going to be in really, really good shape. I think the statistic is 10 servings of fruits and vegetables a day, reduces mortality by over 30%. So really beneficial in for so many things, especially with cancer. So, with fire services, which are at unfortunately such a high risk for this, I say, think vegetables, think cruciferous vegetables, and add lots of spices. One of the firefighters, if you get they are some really good chefs that come in and out of the firehouse that love to cook real meals. And I worry less about people cooking food than all the processed foods. And I think while it's important to include all of those cancer fighting foods, it's also important to take a look at some of the foods in our diet that could be promoting inflammation. And we know that inflammation feeds cancer cells. So what are the inflammatory foods in our diet? And we know the inflammatory foods in our diet are the processed foods in our diet. So really taking a look at what percentage of your diet comes from processed foods and where can you make healthy switches, right? I use the example of coffee mate creamer, which I see in so many fire stations. And, one of the things that coffee mate creamer has, in addition to a lot of sugar and additives and things like that, is it has trans fats, it has hydrogenated oils in them. That's really harmful in terms of cancer. It's really harmful in terms of heart health. And so, all right, so what's the switch from coffee mate creamer? Cream and sugar, I'd be happier with. Cream, milk, things like that. So looking for a more whole food alternative to these really overly processed foods is a really great place to start too, as well as including some of those foods I listed.
Yeah, and I think a big thing I always recommend right off the bat, you mentioned, with some of these oils is cooking oil, because people can be cooking really, really great foods. But if you're cooking in canola oil, vegetable oil, those are not really made for human consumption. So if we can make switches like that, again, these can be little things. We can be cooking meals if you got a great chef and say, hey, maybe instead of that canola oil, that vegetable oil, what if we start using avocado oil or coconut oil or ghee or grass-fed butter or some of these higher quality fats? That right there can make a huge difference. Because if you're using Pam spray that has canola oil and whatever other, propellants in there, that's going to make a big difference if you make that shift. Because if you use that for every single meal and then you make that switch every single meal, that one change can make a massive difference. So I love the emphasis on, a lot of these foods, avoiding processed foods. That's kind of, my 101, where to start, how to eat healthier, eat more whole foods. That's, I think, the most simple answer that can be easily overlooked due to convenience, because it's not always the most convenient to cook whole foods. But, having fruits around, having vegetables around, you don't always have to cook them. If you have an apple, there's not much work besides maybe washing it off to eat it. So I think that we can always find simpler solutions. And a lot of times it's these little tweaks. And a lot of things like ketchup often have, high fructose corn syrup, all these type of things. So maybe switching to an organic, healthier ketchup, maybe that costs you 50 more cents. And I think for the 50 cents, that'll be definitely worth the while. But Chloe, I know we could go on and on about this for probably another hour, but I'd love to just, have you share where people can learn more about what you do, get in contact with what you do, and, follow along. And if they work in the first responder, maybe reach out to you for some support.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, my private practice is Riverside Nutrition. So you can reach me at chloe@riversidenutrition.com. And the website I was talking about that I built for first responders specifically, where you can, download one sheeters on foods to bring on shifts or details or how to design a plate. I think I even have a smoothie handout, how to build a healthy smoothie on there. That's myhealthyresponse.com. And I do work one-on-one with departments, but also if you're interested or you think your department might be interested in having, a bigger, more holistic, group come in, the group I work for is O2X and they are fantastic. They don't just look at nutrition, but they're bringing in sleep specialists. They're bringing in injury prevention specialists. They're bringing in stress management specialists and really, really looking at the whole health too. So they're another great resource, but I'd love to connect and hear from anyone. And yes, I agree, Rob. We could geek out on this stuff for hours and hours to come for sure.
Well, Chloe, thanks for being here. And for everybody listening, I will put all those links in the show notes, the description box here as well. So if you didn't catch that, you can check those out in the description box. And if you're listening to this and you haven't already subscribed to the podcast, I really appreciate that support. And if you feel like this episode could help somebody, share with somebody you know. If you have a firefighter, a first responder in your life, share with them, because realistically, sometimes bringing this to people's awareness can absolutely change their life, because awareness is the first step to change. So if you know anybody that this could benefit, I really want to encourage you to share this with somebody, because you never know what piece of this message they can pick up on and say, hey, wow, maybe I could switch from using canola oil to coconut, or hey, maybe I could focus on not eating late at night. Maybe I could, the list goes on and on. So I really want to encourage you listening to this is, hey, share this with somebody, because it can absolutely change your life. And we never know how we can change somebody's life. So, thank you everybody for listening. Thank you for tuning in. And I will put those links in the description box. So Chloe, thanks for your time, and looking forward to seeing your journey unfold as it continues to serve people.
Thank you so much, Rob, for having me today.
Absolutely. Everybody listening, have the best day ever, and we'll see you soon. Hey, thanks so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. I really appreciate the support and hope you got a lot out of it. So I'm not sure if you follow me on Instagram or not. If you don't, check me out on Whole Health Connections, all one word. But you may have noticed that the Whole Health Community Coaching is now live, and it's free for the entire month of October. And depending on when you're listening to this, if October's already over, don't worry. As a listener to the podcast, you can get 2 free weeks of learning about what we do in this call. So you can tune in for free for 2 calls, determine if it's a good fit for you. And basically what we're doing in here is not only me sharing what I've learned over the past 10 years or so in the world of holistic health and wellness, but also making it community driven. So I lead part of it, and then I also let people give the feedback. I want to hear what you want to learn about. That's what we're going to discuss. It's an opportunity for everybody to learn and grow together. Setting intentions, sharing what's going on in our world, because ultimately, when we communicate and we learn and grow and share our challenges, share our wins, that is where we really are able to level up to the next level. So it's a combination of me sharing what has worked for me and what I've learned, as well as the community sharing what they've learned as well and what they're currently working on. And that way it's building up each other, learning and growing together, collaborating in every way, shape, and form. Talking about nutrition, hydration, sleep, moving, thinking, breathing, building community, building immunity, building resilience. The list goes on and on. We also will have this will be 1 call per week every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have a Discord group that you can tune in there to see some of the previous calls, to get all the Zoom links. And you can also tune into our 1 call per month where we have a practicum. So that is all doing. That may be breathing, that may be yoga, that may be meditation, a combination of all 3. And that's going to be none of me talking per se in terms of sharing what I've learned. It's going to be all of us doing and implementing a lot of these different holistic health and wellness practices. So basically 1 call per week every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and then 1 call per month. That is a practicum. And in the mix of these calls on Thursdays, we will still be doing some of these practicum practices. However, there will be that one call a month dedicated to that entirely. So if you would like to join that and join in for free for the first couple calls, give me a holler, shoot me a message on Instagram at Whole Health Connections, and we can get you plugged into this system and start growing and flowing together. So lots of love. See you on the inside.